The train shrieked as it pulled away, leaving Emily Carter alone on the platform. Rain hammered against the metal roof, a relentless, deafening rhythm that drowned out the wind. She checked her watch. Midnight. The village was nothing more than a collection of jagged silhouettes against a bruised, black sky. Every gust of wind carried the scent of wet stone and stagnant water. She stepped off the concrete, her feet sinking into the mud that bordered the station's perimeter. There were no lights, no welcoming faces, just the station building, a hollow shell of rotting timber and shattered glass that groaned under the pressure of the storm. She pulled her luggage closer, the wheels digging into the gravel as she moved toward the center of the platform. The shadows here were thick, clinging to the corners of the overhang. She turned, scanning the perimeter, but there was only the shifting gray curtain of the downpour. The isolation pressed inward, heavy and absolute. A low, metallic clatter echoed from the far end of the tracks, followed by the faint, rhythmic idling of an engine. Someone was waiting. She stepped forward, leaving the shelter of the roof, and walked into the freezing deluge. A vehicle idled at the station edge, its headlights cutting weak, yellow paths through the driving rain. Emily approached the rear door and pulled it open. The interior smelled of stale tobacco and damp paper. The driver did not turn his head. He had skin like parchment, stretched tight over bone, and he sat perfectly still as she climbed inside. When she spoke the name of the hotel, his hands stiffened on the steering wheel. The trunk latch clicked, then the car lurched forward. They drove through streets where every house stood blind and silent, the windows dark as pits. The windshield wipers beat a frantic, uneven tempo against the glass. The driver took corners sharply, his eyes never leaving the road until they pulled up to the hotel. The neon sign above the entrance flickered, casting a sickly, stuttering light over the foyer. He leaned across the seat, his face inches from hers. The air in the car turned frigid. "Keep your door locked tonight," he rasped, his voice vibrating with a sudden, sharp urgency. Before she could ask why, he shoved the gear into reverse and vanished into the dark, leaving her alone under the buzzing sign. Emily pushed the heavy oak door open. The lobby was a tomb of stagnant air, thick with the scent of wet rot and decaying timber. A single bulb sputtered above a desk cluttered with yellowing ledgers. Behind the counter sat a man, his frame thin and hunched, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere behind her shoulder. He did not greet her. He reached into a drawer, retrieved a brass key, and slid it across the scarred wood surface. Room 204. As Emily reached out to take the key, the man moved with unnatural speed. His cold, bony fingers clamped around her wrist, his grip like a vice. She tried to pull back, but he held her firm, his gaze locking onto hers with a sudden, frantic intensity. The skin of his hand felt like dry paper against her pulse. "If you hear knocking," he hissed, his breath smelling of damp earth, "do not open the door." He released her as abruptly as he had grabbed her, his hand falling back to the desk. He turned his attention to a ledger, his movements erratic and stiff. Emily stared at the brass key. It was heavy, ice cold, and stained with a dark metallic residue. The lobby hummed with a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to pulse from the walls themselves. Emily turned away from the desk and walked toward the stairs. The hallway to 204 was a gauntlet of peeling wallpaper that hung in long, curled strips like dead skin. Above her, a single light bulb swayed, casting erratic shadows that lunged and retreated across the floor. Every step creaked under her weight, the sound echoing too loudly in the narrow space. She found 204. The brass key slid into the lock with a harsh, grinding protest. She pushed the door open. The air inside was an icebox, a sharp, biting chill that hit her lungs the moment she stepped across the threshold. She scanned the room. The air felt heavy, as if the space itself were holding its breath. She walked to the door, turned the deadbolt, and checked the latch twice. The lock held, but the feeling of being watched remained. She moved to the bed and sat. The mattress sagged, smelling of dust and long-forgotten dampness. She was exhausted, her limbs heavy with the weight of the day, yet her mind refused to settle. She lay back, pulling the thin covers to her chin, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silence of the room began to press against her ears, steady and suffocating, until her eyelids finally flickered and closed. The digital clock on the bedside table flickered to 2:43 a.m. The room was deathly still until the sound detonated the silence. Knock, knock, knock. The impact was heavy, deliberate, and vibrated through the frame of the door. Emily snapped awake, her breath hitching in her throat as the rhythm repeated. It was not the sound of a guest seeking entry. It was the sound of something demanding it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, uneven rhythm that drowned out the blood rushing in her ears. She slid from the bed, her bare feet hitting the floorboards with a sharp slap. She moved toward the door, her hands trembling as she reached for the frame to steady herself. The wood felt cold, vibrating with each successive strike. She pressed her right eye to the small, circular glass of the peephole. Outside, the corridor was bathed in a sickly, jaundiced light. A man stood directly before the door, motionless. His skin possessed the pallor of curdled milk, but it was the mouth that froze her blood. His lips were pulled back in a smile that stretched impossibly wide, tearing toward his ears in a jagged, permanent line. He did not blink. His dead, glassy eyes stared directly into the glass, directly into her soul. "Please let me in," he whispered. The voice was not one man, but a discordant chorus of a dozen different tones, all overlapping in a singular, hollow request. The knocking stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the scent of stagnant air and rot. Emily backed away from the door, her heels dragging across the floorboards. She reached for the phone on the nightstand, but the receiver dangled loose, the line emitting only a hollow, dead hum. She was trapped in the room, her eyes darting to the locked door, then to the windows, then back to the center of the room. The space felt altered, the shadows deeper, the air vibrating with a new, localized tension. She turned, her pulse a frantic thrum in her throat, scanning the corners for an exit. Then, the temperature in the room plummeted. A wet, ragged breath brushed against the back of her neck, smelling of damp earth and decay. She spun around, her muscles locking in terror. It was no longer in the hall. He stood by the closet, his presence a dark void in the dim light. His head lolled at an impossible, sickening angle, resting against his shoulder as if the neck were merely a collection of broken glass. He did not move, but the air around him seemed to ripple. "Why didn't you let me in?" The question hung in the air, a whisper that vibrated inside her own skull. Emily gripped the heavy base of the bedside lamp and hurled it with every ounce of her remaining strength. The metal base whistled through the air, but it did not connect. It passed directly through the center of his flickering, translucent form and shattered against the closet door. He remained, indifferent to the impact, his gaze fixed on her. She did not wait to see what happened next. She bolted, her shoulder slammed into the doorframe as she surged into the hallway, her bare feet pounding against the threadbare carpet. The corridor stretched out like a gauntlet of dying light bulbs that buzzed and hissed as she tore past them. Shadows seemed to reach out from the peeling wallpaper, snagging at her heels. She did not check if he was following. She relied on the sound of the floorboards behind her, a soft, wet dragging noise that kept pace with her frantic stride. Her lungs burned with the cold air. Every turn in the hall felt like a trap, every doorway a potential grave. She rounded the corner near the stairs, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She did not look back. She gripped the banister, her knuckles white, and lunged toward the dark descent of the stairwell. Emily tumbled onto the lobby floor, her body trembling as she scrambled toward the exit. Before she could reach the door, a hand caught her arm, spinning her around. The receptionist stood there, his face a mask of primal terror. He didn't offer comfort. He lunged for the deadbolt and slammed it home, the heavy iron bolt clicking into place with a sound of finality. "It is done," he gasped, his voice thin and brittle. Emily clawed at the wood, but he pulled her back, his grip iron tight. He pointed toward the stairs. "That room is not just space. It is a hunger," he spoke of Arthur Vale, a guest from 20 years ago who had chosen that room to end his own life. The receptionist's eyes were wide, fixed on the ceiling as if hearing the floorboards groan above. He did not just die there. He turned the walls into a tomb. Every soul that enters, the room claims. Emily stopped fighting, her breath hitching as the reality took hold. The hotel was not a place of rest, but a cycle. The man she had encountered was not a visitor, but a permanent resident of a room that never finished feeding. The receptionist pressed his back against the door, his eyes darting toward the shadows, waiting for the knocking to start again. Days passed in London, but the silence of the city felt wrong. Emily sat on her sofa, the light of the afternoon fading into a gray, oppressive dusk. She kept her phone face down on the table, a reflex born of 3 nights without sleep. Finally, she picked it up, her thumb hovering over the gallery icon. She scrolled through the files, searching for a distraction. Her finger stopped. A new image sat in the folder, timestamp 2:47 a.m. She tapped the screen. The room was dark, but the glow of the phone revealed the bed. She was there, eyes closed, deep in a shallow, fitful sleep. Inches from her face, hovering in the void of the frame, the man stared directly into the lens. His mouth was pulled into that impossible wide grin, tearing toward his ears. A text overlay shimmered on the screen. "I'm still here." Emily dropped the phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor, the glass cracking in a spiderweb pattern. She looked toward the darkened hallway of her apartment, her pulse thudding in her throat. The distance between the hotel and her home had meant nothing. The cycle had not broken. It had simply moved to a new address. Emily sat paralyzed in the center of her living room. Every shadow in the apartment seemed to pulse with a life of its own. She watched the digital clock on the wall, the red numbers shifting with agonizing slowness. 2:41, 2:42. She gripped the arms of the chair, her knuckles turning white, waiting for the inevitable. The clock clicked forward. 2:43 a.m. The silence of the apartment vanished. A sound erupted from the hallway, vibrating through the floorboards and into the soles of her feet. Knock, knock, knock. It was heavy, deliberate. The force of it shook the frame of her front door. She did not move. She could not. The rhythm was identical to the one in the hotel, precise and unending. Knock, knock, knock. The wood groaned under the pressure of the strikes. There was no escape this time. No lobby to flee to, no receptionist to warn her. The space between her home and the tomb had collapsed entirely. She stared at the door, listening to the hollow thuds that echoed through her life, realizing the knocking would never stop. It was not a request to enter. It was a reminder that she was already trapped.